Hello and welcome to the St. Andrew's Society of Los Angeles podcast. Each episode will bring you the latest news from the St. Andrew's Society of Los Angeles, as well as fascinating interviews with entertainment personalities, government leaders, and community advocates. St. Andrew's Society of Los Angeles, where Scotland meets the City of Angels. Let's get started. Hello and welcome to another great episode of the St. Andrew's Society of Los Angeles' podcast. I'm your host, Jowanna, and today we have an amazing show lined up for you. I'm very excited about today's show. First, I'd love to introduce you to our guest moderator and co-host, again, Mr. Ian Skone-Rees. Ian Skone-Rees is former president of the St. Andrew's Society of Los Angeles from 2014 to 2020, and the former vice president of the British American Chamber of Commerce. Ian, thanks so much for joining us again on another great episode.
Well, you're welcome. Thank you, Joe. It's my pleasure.
And today we have Ms. Joni Smith. Joni Smith is the Scottish Affairs Counselor for the United States. With 12 years of civil service, Joni Smith has worked in various roles across the Scottish government, the majority of which included responsibilities for members of the Scottish Cabinet. She has worked directly for the First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, as head of her questions briefing team and as a senior policy advisor. Her earlier government communications duties were preceded by experience as a broadcast journalist. Joni is a native of Aberdeen with degrees from the University of Aberdeen and Robert Gordon University. Joni, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Delighted to be here with you both today.
Fantastic. Well, I am so eager to get started with this podcast, and I know we've got a lot of really great questions and some really fun stuff that we want to delve into and hopefully get some really great stories from you. So let's get started.
Well, Joni, first of all, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us this morning. You know how appreciative I am personally, and the support you've given the St. Andrew's Society in Los Angeles has been exemplary, and we look forward to working with you even in greater length in the future. Now, the first question I'm going to ask you, I'll probably mess up with my pronunciation, but I'm going to do my best. As Joe has already indicated, we understand you were born in Aberbrothrock. Is that close?
It's close-ish. So the traditional pronunciation of the traditional name would be Aberbrothick.
Aberbrothick. Okay.
Yeah.
Very good. Well, now I know. However, it's known to most of us as Arbroath.
It is.
And it's fitting that we should be talking in 2020, as this year is the 700th anniversary of the Declaration of Arbroath. And I was wondering if this historical fact and the fact that you were born and brought up in Arbroath, was that did that propel you into government service?
So as you've heard me say before, Ian, I love and I'm beyond proud of my hometown. I think it is, it fundamentally makes me who I am. My upbringing there was a wonderful, wonderful thing, and my parents are still there. And notwithstanding COVID and the restrictions right now, I go home as often as is possible, which unfortunately hasn't been as possible as we might like in 2020. But it's a small town, for those that don't know it. It has around 23,000 people. It's on the northeast coast of Scotland, and it's well known for many things, but my top three are the Arbroath Smoky, which is a fish. It's a delicacy, and if anyone hasn't tried it, they must. A pretty excellent football, or as you would say, soccer team. They've been on a pretty good run of late, and they also, I still think, hold the record for the most goals scored of any senior football team in a competition, which was from when they beat Aberdeen Bonaccord 36-0 in 1885. So we're still holding on to that record, and we're very proud of it. And then finally, as you say, also known for being the location, Arbroath Abbey, where the Declaration of Arbroath was signed in 1320, it's obviously one of Scotland's most important historic documents, and we had lots of plans around the celebration of the 700th anniversary this year, which unfortunately are on pause, but we look forward to being able to bring some of that back next year. But I definitely think my upbringing influenced my choices and my path into government service. As was mentioned at the beginning, I've been in the civil service for a number of years now, more than I might care to mention, and being able to represent both Arbroath and Scotland overseas is nothing short of a privilege.
You're serving overseas now, and as you mentioned, you have not been able to get back home as often as you would like. But from a work point of view, from a career point of view, is this something that you are enjoying, or would you prefer to be back in the action in the Scottish government in Edinburgh?
What a question. I mean, let's be honest, being able to work within the British Embassy, represent Scotland and the Scottish Government, work in partnership with our UK government colleagues and represent Scotland, the kind of country of your birth overseas, is a privilege, and personally will always be a career highlight for me, regardless of what I go on to next. I think right now it's pretty conflicting, really. I mean, we miss home, we miss friends and family. I was fortunate enough to be in the UK at the early part of this year, just basically immediately before everything shut down in March. So I, not intentionally, but happened to get back right before, but we obviously haven't been back since then. I think colleagues back home are working extremely hard on the response, and we're contributing to that from overseas. But yeah, I mean, the work that we do over here will be critical in terms of the economic recovery as we move out of this in the more medium to long term. So long and short, absolutely delighted to still be here, missing friends and family greatly, missing Scotland greatly, but looking forward to the time when we'll be able to get back, visit, and get back to some sort of life as normal.
In normal times, is there a posting period that you would normally have? I know out here normally for the British Consul General here it's 2 years. Sometimes it stretches to 3. But in normal times, would you expect to be here for 2 years or longer?
So currently, it's I'm working on a 4-year posting. So I'm now on the countdown, in case you haven't been able to do the fast math. My finish date will be July 2021. So I'm on 10 months and counting, which it has gone by in a flash. So routinely, these postings they follow similar to what you've described. It was a 3-year initially, it became 4. So I'll be here till next summer and looking to do all that we can to get the most out of the last 10 months that we have here, but obviously, albeit within the current restrictions that we're facing.
Yes, I remember when we first met at the Seaside Games in Ventura. That was 2 or 3 years ago now, but it really seems just like yesterday. And I would just like to mention and emphasize what a tremendous asset you were to all of us there. And it made the ties between our St. Andrews Society in Los Angeles and Scotland so much stronger. And we all remember that visit, and we are very appreciative that you were able to be there with Rory. I don't know if he shared the photograph I sent to him with you.
He has. He's a bit of a fashion trendsetter, I believe.
Yes, well, I told him that imitation was the sincerest form of flattery, so I wore my
I think kilts and flip-flops are going to be the next big thing.
So from an individual perspective, during your time in the United States, what is the principal thing you would like to achieve during your posting?
So many things. I think when you're in these 3 or 4 year postings, I think it's all about building on the progress that's been made to date, standing on the work that has gone before you, and incrementally moving things forward. And I think for us, you've touched on it already, but certainly for me, that's been around further strengthening, deepening, and growing the relationships that we have, whether that's with Congress, with state level governments, with business stakeholders, with our diaspora, with the ever-growing alumni of Scotland's universities that exist in the United States now. All of that is crucial, and that is the thing I have put front and centre of everything that I have done. Relationships are central to everything that we do, and we obviously take those networks and work alongside our partners, Scottish Development International, and Visit Scotland, Scotland's universities, our cultural bodies, to use those networks to help us deliver on our broader shared objectives for Scotland. So if I was talking about, what I want to achieve, I think it's around that further strengthening of those relationships and making sure those relationships can deliver.
Well, from our perspective out here in Los Angeles, it's certainly succeeding, because over the last several years, just to take one case in point, the outreach from the universities, Aberdeen, Glasgow, and Edinburgh, has been tremendous. And of course, we have alumni who live here in Southern California, and the various secretaries of those groups have been very supportive, attending our events, our garden party when we were able to have it. We couldn't do that this year, and our Burns nights. So this seems to have blossomed in the last few years. And
yeah, for sure.
At one time, going back maybe 5, 6, 7 years, we were very much, I think, regarded as the Wild West here. And there was more activity going on the East Coast. But again, from our perspective, that has gone 180 degrees. And for whatever you've done to facilitate that journey, we are very appreciative. But our St. Andrews societies exist all over the world. And as far as we know, the first was established here in the United States. It wasn't the United States then, in Charlotte, South Carolina, and that was in 1729. And they were established as charitable organizations to support newly arrived immigrants who didn't have contacts, didn't have a source of income, and so forth. And today, many, including our own, still focus on charitable giving. And that's very much at the forefront of our activities, as you know. And promoting the culture of Scotland, of course, is foremost in our mission. But how important is promoting traditional Scottish culture in the mission of the Scottish Affairs Office?
Well, I mean, Scotland's culture, it goes without saying, can be traced back thousands of years. And we would argue, and I think it's fair to say, that it's just as alive today as it's ever been. Each generation through Scotland and through our diaspora has added their own cultural footprint, which I think is what makes Scotland's culture quite so vibrant and unique, with such a wide variety of cultural customs. I mean, what's clear to us operating here in the US is that, keeping those Scottish traditions alive is hugely important for many of our Scots American diaspora communities. It gives them a sense of belonging, a reminder of their heritage. And I think right now, that's particularly important in uncertain times. It gives people that sense of grounding. Mm-hmm. And I've always said, as much as we also showcase the modern diaspora groups, keeping our history, heritage, and culture alive also helps us to increase our visibility. And for that, we're very grateful. Within the Scottish Affairs Office itself, as I've said, we showcase the traditional, and we also showcase and celebrate contemporary culture. We've had partnerships like Scottish Ballet had a partnership last year with Ballet West in Salt Lake City. And then also through our diaspora communities, our diaspora groups, including your own, we work to promote cultural activities and events within which we can showcase new talent, whether that's emerging folk singers or musicians, but that merging of the new and the old will never not be important and will always be part of our calling card.
Yeah, I think as you're aware, two of our Scottish Highland dancers have been crowned world champions at Cowell over the last 3 or 4 years. And our Pasadena pipes and drums were also first in their class 2 years ago in the piping competitions. And, that's very important to us. In fact, our St. Andrew Society gave grants to both the Pasadena pipes and drums and the two young individuals who were crowned world champions, and we're very, very proud of that. Winston Churchill once said that of all the small nations of this earth, perhaps only the ancient Greeks surpassed the Scots in their contribution to mankind. And Arthur Herman's book, How the Scots Invented the Modern World, is reminiscent of these observations of Churchill. How is it that Scotland, this tiny nation in the midst of the North Sea, has been so successful across so many disciplines, science, medicine, and the arts? What's the secret?
Oh, where to start? I mean, our historic influence across multiple disciplines, as you say, is long documented. You've heard me give numerous speeches which involve all of those examples. And, right from the formation of what we now know to be the United States, Scots and their descendants have been involved in the shaping of the country, whether that's been through innovation or business and industry, the legal system, education, politics, the works. We like to think that long tradition of innovation is alive and kicking and as strong today as it has ever been. If I was to characterize why, I suppose access to educational opportunities is key to Scotland's ambition to being a modern, dynamic and inclusive economy. We have some of the most highly rated scientific institutions in the world. So studying in Scotland gives students access to world-class facilities and multiple centres of excellence. There's also a lot of collaboration. So in a smaller country, but with a high number of higher education institutions, there's collaboration with the private sector. So, for example, right now we see Highlands and Islands Enterprise, the University of the Highlands and Islands, and the National Health Service in the Highlands all working together and collaborating on projects around life sciences. We also attract a lot of foreign direct investment, and the US is a major provider of some of that foreign inward investment. Some of that goes to research and development, and therefore we're still doing world-leading, groundbreaking work in the fields of medicine and STEM disciplines, for example. And I think as well, the important thing is that both Scotland and the Scottish Government is hugely proud of our culture and arts sector and see it as part of both the economic driver of the country and also for well-being. And we're committed to ensuring as many people as far across the world over are aware of our cutting-edge arts scene as is possible, and with products and assets such as the Edinburgh Festivals to be able to promote it. Really is a gift.
Especially with Edinburgh being cancelled this year, and that you're right, that is such a huge cultural event that happens every year. And I know that they've been trying, especially this year, doing a lot of that stuff online. How is that actually kind of working out? And is everybody kind of getting this sense of oh, okay, we've adapted, and because we've adapted, maybe we're seeing a different audience that we wouldn't have maybe seen, because now people who would have gone to Scotland aren't going to Scotland, but are maybe having watch parties for some of the plays that they would have seen in there, at the Fringe Fest and whatnot.
Sure. I think much like the rest of the world, people are pivoting and they are trying to spot opportunities where they might be able to showcase, highlight and promote, particularly in the culture and art scene. So absolutely that is there. I think it's a little early to be measuring direct impact, but our national companies, Scottish Ballet have got a programme of online activity, Scottish Chamber Orchestra have got a programme of online activity. Everybody is pivoting and making sure that where they can, they are still showcasing and promoting. And this is where obviously our international networks, including within the US and the vast networks that our diaspora groups have really come into their own, because being able to use those diverse networks, me stepping outside my comfort zone and doing things like this, being able to promote that message, showcase, highlight, and shout about it as much as is possible, that's even more important than it ever was right now. So yes, it's happening, and anything that people can do to engage and promote, we're very grateful for.
Yeah, there's obviously nothing that can replace a gathering of people physically. But this new situation that we're forced into, where we're doing a lot of virtual stuff online, do you think this is going to become part of the new normal once we get back to normality, that we'll be using these virtual ways of contacting and engaging people a lot more than we have in the past?
I mean, I think on a general level, that's probably already happened. I think people are waking up to the opportunity that these platforms have offered us. I think at the same time, some people have got video conference fatigue, unsurprisingly, because we're all spending all day communicating in this way. So somewhere in the middle, there's a healthy balance. But absolutely, I mean, even for me to be able to engage with you, obviously you're on the West Coast, you're not a world away, but we never get to come out as often as we might like to engage with you in person. But being able to boost that with online and virtual engagement, and we've seen an awful lot of stakeholders within the US who didn't necessarily have digital comms platforms prior to this situation develop them. And I very much hope that they will stay as part of the communications mix, because they're invaluable in terms of being able to directly access people in a very quick way and to get your message directly into people's homes. But a little bit of face-to-face will be welcome when the time is right and it's safe to do so. But yeah, I mean, I think these tools have provided us with a lot of opportunity right now.
Yes, it's interesting that in some situations we found that our audience for get-togethers, meetups, small little gatherings, and so forth has actually grown because we're doing it virtually.
Yeah.
The distances here in Los Angeles, as you're well aware, Joni, are so vast, and for people to get to a particular place is very often challenging. But to sit behind the computer and talk to one another is a lot easier to do. I've been in Los Angeles for longer than I care to remember. And during this time, I've been heavily involved in many UK organizations. And it is apparent to me that over this long length of time, that the focus, particularly of government organizations, has changed from being a purely diplomatic one to one which is much more heavily focused on building commercial relationships. And I wonder, is this the principal focus of the Scottish Affairs Office?
So, as you know, we are a small but mighty team, and our role is, I would say, multi-level. So our job is fundamentally to contribute to the effort that looks to continually improve Scotland's international reputation, and we do that with a range of partners, including, as you've mentioned there, the Los Angeles Consul General and the wider UK diplomatic missions that are across the country. And to continue to showcase Scotland, we focus on what we call 5 key pillars. And to your point, they do focus on the economy, but they are essentially, we want to showcase Scotland as the best place to live, work, study, invest, and visit. And we see them all as economic drivers. As you've mentioned, or has come up a couple of times in the conversation, America is Scotland's largest export market. It's also our largest source of foreign inward investment. So it is a hugely important audience for us. And in this particular area, we work with our enterprise agency, our trade and investment promotion agency, Scottish Development International, who also operate in America. And we also work with our national tourism body, Visit Scotland, to help create opportunities to increase trade and exports for Scottish companies, and also to increase investment back into Scotland and to showcase Scottish innovation. But alongside that, we also work to promote Scotland's global reputation, to ensure that it remains seen as an attractive place to do business. So you should want to invest your business in there because of who we are and what we are. So we do that by building partnerships and awareness on the Scottish Government's approach to policies with their global significance. So the obvious example there is climate change. We have signed memorandums of understanding with the Governor of California and also with the Governor of New Jersey on working together as subnational actors to promote the drivers of climate change and to help tackle it. We also had the Governor of Maine in Scotland last year, who was interested to learn more about our approach to green energy. We promote Scotland's culture and our higher education institutions, which we've already touched on, but we showcase excellence in those sectors as often and as loudly as we can. We work with the Friends of Scotland caucus in Congress, highlighting policies of shared interest to members, sometimes pointing out unhelpful policies. So right now we are pointing out the impact of US tariffs on Scottish goods, for example. We also work with members' offices to make sure that key Scottish moments are celebrated on Capitol Hill. So Burns, St Andrew's Day, Tartan Day, there's nothing quite like bagpipes and kilts on Capitol Hill as far as I am concerned. And I think the final important bit to mention is that we also work with our wonderfully engaged and energised networks, whether that's our diaspora, our alumni, our global Scots, and some people are all three of those, but just to ensure that your vast networks can further amplify and share the work that we do and our messages with your kind of core stakeholders.
What are your major challenges when you're trying to attract inward investment?
I mean, I don't know that I would actually focus on the challenges, and you'll be unsurprised to hear me say that. But actually, I think for us, we are starting from a very strong baseline, particularly when it relates to the US. In the most recent Ernst & Young Attractiveness Survey, which is what measures inward investment in the UK, Scotland again came second only to London in terms of the amount of inward investment attracted to Scotland. And we're also extremely fortunate in that much of that is America's already a very big investor in Scotland. So 34%, I think, is the most recent figure, although don't test me on that. 34% of our inward investment, around that number, comes from the United States. I think more so than that, we are also seen very favourably by United States audiences. So it's a strong brand, people recognise it. By and large, there's very strong positive associations for Scotland. And alongside that, the things I've mentioned around a highly educated workforce, the talent that exists within the country, it's hugely attractive for people. I think the main challenge is just, making sure that your voice is heard in a very crowded global landscape. And, we continue to do all we can to, leverage any option available to us to make sure that we continue to shout as loud as possible.
A related question here in Southern California. Obviously, we're in the middle of the entertainment industry. Although Southern California is facing huge competition from other parts of the country. But what can Scotland offer the film industry to attract production companies to film and produce in Scotland?
So I may be slightly biased, but I obviously think that there is no more photogenic backdrop, be it rugged countryside or cityscapes, than Scotland. This plus a ready supply of high quality, well-trained sector specialists, and also, let's not forget, sometimes 17 hours of daylight in summertime make it a perfect location for filming. We obviously have incentives also. There is the UK film and high-end television tax relief, which I think is a pretty well-known thing within the LA film sector. Scotland also has the Production Growth Fund and a broadcast content fund. We have Screen Scotland, who are our new-ish, they've been in existence for a little while now, home for all things film in Scotland. And it's a dedicated partnership that is designed to provide a one-stop shop for everything you would need in terms of your consideration for filming in Scotland. So whether that's advice on funding, scouting locations, finding access to skilled crew and the right facilities, they're there to help with all of that. And I would actively encourage people to get in touch with either me or them directly if you are keen to learn more about those opportunities.
The question is, how closely do you guys work with Visit Scotland, and how has the pandemic affected tourism in Scotland?
So, I mean, let me take the first bit first. We work extremely closely with Visit Scotland. Essentially in country, the Scottish Government, Scottish Development International and Visit Scotland operate as one. We are in touch constantly. We're all in different locations given the scale of the US geography. So we have priority stakeholders and markets in various places. So we are very much a virtual Team Scotland, but we work very much as Team Scotland, and we communicate daily to make sure that our approaches are aligned and that we are supporting one another and amplifying each other's activity wherever possible. On the second point of your question, obviously Scottish tourism has been impacted by the pandemic and the lack of international travel, the same as many places around the world. America up until this year was, I think, our second highest provider of tourism, and Americans are often disappointed when I tell them they're second highest rather than the top. But what I would assure you is that you come top of the amount of time that you stay there and the amount of money that you spend. So for that, we're extremely grateful. But yeah, Americans do stay longer and spend more than the average international traveller, which is crucially important. So obviously right now, our priority is on keeping people safe and following local and international guidance. But we are still encouraging potential future visitors to dream now, book later. So dream, research, plan your holiday to Scotland. And so when the restrictions are lifted and when you personally feel that you are safe to travel, you'll be able to do just that.
Well, that's good advice, and I know a lot of people here are champing at the bit and wish they could be traveling to Scotland now, particularly the pipe bands and the Highland dancers who were looking forward to competing in Scotland, which didn't happen. But this conversation has been incredibly valuable, and as we broadcast it and put it out on our various social networks and our websites and so forth, it's going to help bring people closer to understanding Scotland, what your office is doing, and what Scotland has to offer, not only on an individual basis, but on a much wider scale. But beyond that, is there any particular way that all of us here in Southern California, and of course, across the country, can stay in touch with what's happening with the Scottish government in the United States?
Yeah, I mean, very straightforward and much like everybody else. But the easiest way to keep up to date with the work that we do is to follow our Twitter account, which is very simply @ScotGovUSA. We also have a LinkedIn, which is obviously focused on the more trade and investment and innovation aspects of the work that we do, but always worth a follow there for a wider range of information. And our account on LinkedIn is ScotGov in the USA. You'll also find each of us listed as individual team members there. So if you want to contact each of us, that's an easy way to do it as well. And then finally, we're also now issuing a quarterly newsletter. So anyone that's interested in being added to the list for that, don't worry, Ian, you are on it. But anyone who is interested in being added to the list for that can email us at washi, which is WASHI, .scottishaffairs@fco.gov.uk. And then I suppose the final thing to mention, given the subject matter that we've covered in the discussion, is anyone that's interested in learning more about trade and investment incentives, they can all be found on Scottish Development International's website. And anyone who's interested in film and TV incentives can find that on Screen Scotland's website.
Well, that's excellent. Well, I think we've come to the end, Jo. Over to you.
Well, thank you both so much for taking the time to sit with us today. Joni, it has been insightful and wonderful to talk to you. I've loved talking about kind of the business aspect of Scotland, and you don't realize how much investment goes into another country and how much economic opportunity there is. So thank you so much for kind of enlightening me as well as our audience on that. And Ian, it's always a pleasure having you on as my co-host and guest moderator. Again, everybody out there, you have been listening to the St. Andrews Society of Los Angeles' podcast. I've been your host, Jowanna Lewis, and we will see you on the next episode. Again, thank you both so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of the St. Andrews Society of Los Angeles podcast. For more information on the St. Andrews Society of Los Angeles, visit www.standrewsla.org. And don't forget to like our Facebook page, Instagram, and YouTube channels as well. Have a great week, and we'll see you next episode.